Chaverim, you may be seated. At this moment, I'm happy to introduce E.J. Tench, who uses the pronouns they, them, and their, and represents Keshet as the Education and Training Operations Manager. E.J. started their professional journey as both a martial arts instructor and natural museum educator, before moving into operations in the national e-commerce sector. As an LGBTQ Jew, passionate about educational equity and efficient coordination, they now love connecting their identity and values to their profession at Keshet. EJ graduated from Old Dominion University and holds a Bachelor of Science in Sociology with a degree concentration in social welfare and a cognate in business. And we just know her as someone who joins us in shul on Shabbos all the time. So I'm going to invite EJ to come forward and share some Torah with us.
Shabbat Shalom, everybody. So as Rabbi said, my name is EJ, and I use gender-neutral pronouns, so you can refer to me as, oh, EJ, they gave a davar today, or they did something at the Bima. But I started attending last year online until Johnny Parker encouraged me to come in person, and I've really enjoyed being here. Back in the spring, the Social Action Committee asked me to share with you all about my professional work, which focuses on LGBTQ belonging in the Jewish world. I'm grateful the calendar worked out the way it did, and I got to speak in the fall, since it gave me time to be more comfortable here and to join as a member. So I'm really excited to speak now officially as a member of RST and to share with you later at our Shabbat Shmooze. I started my Jewish life in the Reform movement, but as time went on, I gained a growing interest and respect for the conservative movement. What I love most about conservative Judaism is the insistence that Torah and halakha are binding. This is what makes Jews Jews. And yet it is incumbent upon each generation of Jews to understand Torah and halakha for our times. It is binding, but not stagnant. It is a living relationship, engaging with our people's complexity and diversity. We see this living relationship in the week's Parsha, as our people are given a troubling directive and a stifling rule. We're given the directive to kill defiant sons by stoning, and we're also given a ban on wearing clothes of a different gender. Today, we definitely, hopefully, refrain from the former, and we don't enforce the latter. Yet these are not new or modern interpretations. Conservative Judaism has built upon the work of our previous generations. Regarding the stoning of wayward and rebellious sons, we first learn in the Talmud that this commandment of the Torah was never once carried out. Our sages refused to interpret this verse literally, as it conflicted with their sense of human dignity. Our ancestors took what appeared as a straightforward and horrific rule, and over time built layers of meaning, developing a complex criteria so no one could really qualify as a rebellious son. I'm going to read some of them and try to see if you could possibly qualify. So in the Mishnah, we learn that first, a son has to be old enough to grow lower body hair, so no babies or toddlers are getting stoned. 2, the son must gluttonously eat meat and drink wine in public, with the caveat that the wine is kosher. With the second caveat, because there is a second one, that the consumption occurs outside of a religious festival. Additionally, number 3, the son must also steal food from his father, but that's not enough. He then has to eat it in someone else's house. Then, if you manage to check all of those off, you must be simultaneously accused by both of your parents, warned in the presence of 3 witnesses, and finally tried by a court of 23 judges. Oh, all right, I'm guessing nobody matched that. At least I hope not. And even if you did somehow qualify, The Gemara introduces even more technicalities that I'm not going to go into. We'd be here for a long time. But that still wasn't enough for our sages. While Rabbi Shimon previously said the law was never carried out, Rabbi Yohanan countered that by saying, I have seen it happen, and I sat on the boy's grave. What Rabbi Yohanan wants us to know is that merely interpreting the law in a more dignified way isn't enough, but we need to really confront with and grapple with the harm caused by a literal interpretation. Likewise, our tradition takes a look at a seemingly clear-cut command. A woman must not put on man's apparel, nor shall a man wear woman's clothing, for whoever does these things is abhorrent to your God. And yet, the Babylonian Talmud interprets this verse as a prohibition on concealing one's gender for the purposes of infiltrating a space in the hope to gain access to others to cause them harm. Otherwise, when putting on gendered clothing for the purposes of joy, the text teaches there is no abomination here. We definitely do it at Purim. And the reinterpretation didn't stop there. Rashi explains this verse is not simply a prohibition on wearing the clothes of the opposite gender, but is instead a prohibition on doing it if it leads to adultery or to seduce someone. Maimonides claims this verse is actually intended to prohibit cross-dressing for the purposes of idol worship. In the commentary at Vetz Chaim before you, you'll see a note arguing that the verse prohibits transgender Jews from wearing the clothes that align with our genders. Etz Chaim reflects the conservative movement's stance toward transgender people in 2001, but today that's no longer the case. In an example of Judaism's continual analysis of our tradition, the conservative movement now posits the following. It is only wrong to wear the clothes of a different gender if that causes harm, and it is, in turn, harmful to transgender Jews when we are barred from wearing the clothing that we find authentic and affirming. So by this point, you can probably see the connection I'm making to the Shabbat shmooze later this afternoon. There are other areas of Torah where the conservative movement has transformed or circumvented a biblical institution when later on it came to be viewed as ethically unjustifiable. Regarding LGBTQ people, and we will define that later on Shabbat shmooze, over the past 40 years, our rabbis confronted the permanent social loneliness mandated by halachic precedent. They considered how discrimination is responsible for 1 in 3 LGBTQ youth reporting physical threats and attacks at school and their home, how over 3/4 of transgender and non-binary young people experience bullying and assaults, and the increase in LGBTQ adults reporting suicide risk, difficulty in employment, and limited familial support. Seeing this stark reality, our movement applied Jewish law sensitively and effectively, drawing upon not only the precedents of our tradition, but also its fundamental concepts and values. The rabbinate specifically highlighted 2 values, kavod habriot and dor v'dorashav. Regarding the first one, kavod habriot, human dignity, the Committee on Jewish Law and Standards writes, dignity is a central concern of the written and oral Torah and is a well-established halachic principle. So great is human dignity that it supersedes a negative commandment of the Torah. For thousands of years, this value urged our ancestors to scaffold safeguards to protect the marginalized. Remember all the safeguards in place so you don't get stoned if you're a rebellious son. Today, it empowers us to imagine and build Jewish communities where our LGBTQ members can thrive, where we are acknowledged as being beautifully created in the divine image, and our participation is essential for the Jewish future. We're able to adjust our laws because of the second value, dor v'dorashav. Each generation demands its own interpretation of Jewish law. As the Torah says, when a matter shall arise that confounds you, you shall go and inquire of the judge who shall be in that day, and they will tell you the law. We don't want to simply overrule our ancestors. We assume that they were closer to the Torah's origin. But in areas where we demonstrate deeper knowledge and experience, we are granted the ability to issue a new interpretation. The conservative movement updated our laws after years of consultation with medical experts and the testimony of LGBTQ Jews. Today, we understand that gender and sex diversity is intrinsic to many species, and for humans, it's key to our personal identities and how we experience relationships. It is those values and more that power my day-to-day life and my work. Today after lunch, I'll share more about Keshet, the national organization I work for. As a group, we'll devote some time to terms and concepts, like what is the LGBTQ acronym, what are your questions, what are pronouns, whatever you want to ask me. And then we'll time travel through conservative Judaism's evolving attitudes towards LGBTQ belonging and get a sense of what the future holds. Thank you truly so much for warmly welcoming me here over the past many months and for clearly living the traditions and values that ground us as a people. I look forward to this afternoon and to many such lunches with you all in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, EJ. All right, let's hurry up and get to lunch. Who's doing